Took place, you said actually on stage that you wanted the audience to watch the movie, of course, but also to experience it such as if it was a folk song. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that? Because this gentleman says actually it almost feels like some kind of bluegrass with the ending especially, and maybe you can reflect on that.
Absolutely. My father sang me bluegrass songs all through my childhood, so I'm glad you mentioned that. I wanted to make a film that, well, let me go back. I've always enjoyed or appreciated the way folk tradition works and the way a story can be passed down and told by one person and then told by another person, and it changes slightly. And music, when the folk legends become songs, when people begin to sing these tales, they always do it in their own way. It's always the same story, but they tell it in their own voice, with their own instrumentation, sing it in a different tune. Sometimes the lyrics change, sometimes the entire body of the song changes, but the intrinsic quality of it remains the same. And I love that. I love that tradition. I love that phenomenon. And I wanted to make a film that functioned in the same way and that told a very familiar story, a very traditional story, but in my own, through my own voice.
I have some kind of a basic question to ask, and it's about the story itself of the movie. Why did you choose to treat such a story? That's the first part of the question. Maybe it's because of this musical aspect, and maybe you can talk about it. And also about the foster father. This gentleman says that he didn't really understand, and maybe he was, I don't know, that doesn't really understand. Maybe you can reflect more on that as well.
I will answer the first question first, and I wanted, actually I'm going to go with the second question first. The Keith Carradine character, Mr. Scarrett, was I wanted to create a character who's simply a patriarch. He was the patriarchal character in this drama, and he was a foster father to Bob and Ruth, and the real father to Freddie, their friend who was killed at the beginning. And there's very little dialogue that explains who he is or what he did, but the idea was that he is a criminal himself who has made his living as a criminal and taught other people to do things for him. And so when Ruth says that we were just doing what you taught us to do, she's suggesting that he led them into this life of crime. And it was important for me to have a character who represents that, who represents sort of the evil side of their lives from which they came, but for that character to also be trying to do the right thing and to give up his ways and trying, and he aspires towards goodness, and that's what that character represents. And I'm sorry, what was the first question again?
First question is about the story itself.
And as for the story itself, I wanted to do something, well, in many of the folklore and folk songs in America have to do with outlaws. And, Jesse James, Billy the Kid, all of these famous criminals who've had songs written about them. And, the murder ballads of America are something that I've, listened to for all my life. And I wanted to make a film that used those archetypes and use that iconography. And so it's a very simple and very basic setup for the story. And it's a setup that's been used in Bonnie and Clyde and Gun Crazy and True Romance and in Badlands. Any movie where there is, two lovers who are on the wrong side of the law, I wanted to make a film that functioned in that tradition, but to pick up where those movies usually leave off.
That this feeling we have when we watch your movie, do you think it all comes from this bluegrass tradition, or is there a lot from you as an input, as a director, as an editor as well? Maybe you can talk about it.
There absolutely is a great deal of me personally in the film. I wanted the characters to all represent different sides of myself, and they do. I mean, there's a lot of Bob Muldoon in me. There's a lot of Ruth in me, and Patrick Wheeler, the sheriff. My middle name is Patrick, so I wanted to make his character, he speaks my language, so to speak. I wanted the movie to have that sort of musical quality and to function the way I when I hear certain songs and when I, or even watch certain movies, I have a very distinct feeling that is my own, it's my own interpretation, and I wanted to capture that feeling and try to preserve it on film. And so it's in many ways a very mimetic film in that I am, trying to replicate a feeling that I have, but a feeling is an abstraction, and so it's difficult. But as far as that regard goes, it is very personal to me, and the editing, the music, the rhythm of the entire piece is the way that I think about things like this and the way I feel, and it's just as direct a representation as possible of my own personal feelings towards this type of subject matter and this tradition.
How did you not train but prepare the actors for such roles? Because it's very much inner playing. Everything comes from the inside and sometimes actually stays inside, but we still through the face or whatever, we still feel it. How could you manage to obtain such a performance from the actors?
We just talk a lot, and we spend a lot of time just discussing the script and the characters, and I would give them music to listen to. I don't know if they ever listened to it or not, but it was music that I felt suggested what the characters were feeling. I know that Rooney had songs that she listened to that put her in the right mood for the scenes or for the character, and Ben Foster did as well. And with Casey, he just loves to. We would get together and talk and just talk on the phone and just spend a lot of time just walking around and discussing the character. And the more time you spend doing that, you can sort of go down a dark tunnel of a very myopic perspective and begin to get lost in the character. But all of it is very useful because hopefully you do that enough and spend enough time in advance doing that so that when you get to the set, they have a very good understanding on a subconscious level of what their character is and what they're going through. And in the case of Rooney, whose character is very opaque and she never really says what she's feeling until the end of the movie, and she never explains what she's going through. It all just comes through in her face. That was, again, we went through and talked about every scene and just tried to figure out for ourselves what she was feeling. And I can't say for sure that she agreed with me, and whether she, if I said, well, in this scene you're missing Bob, maybe she would feel the other way, the opposite. But as long as I could see on the day that we were shooting that she had the emotion there, and that it corresponded to what I thought was there, it was okay. And so I can't, for however she prepared for it was private. She ultimately got to that place on her own, and I just I just watched her face and made sure that I could see what I wanted to see in it. And that's a beautiful thing about silent acting, I suppose, is that it can be subjective.
Did you decide to cast Casey Affleck after watching the assassination of James Butterfield, this movie? Did you choose to cast him after seeing this movie because this gentleman says that the character is actually quite close to the one he was playing in this movie? And the other question is about Rooney Mara's character. She almost feels, thanks to the cinematography and everything, there is the sunlight behind and a lot of sun cast. She almost, this gentleman is asking you, did you make this and shoot her in that way in order to represent her as some kind of the future of man?
The first question, I certainly love the assassination of Jesse James, and I've been a fan of Casey Affleck since Good Will Hunting, and back when he was much younger, and the film he made with Gus Van Sant, Jerry, I think is one of my favorite films. And so I was very excited about the possibility of working with him, but the great thing that Assassination of Jesse James provided for me was the confidence that he would be able to fit into a period piece and not feel modern. That was very important to me. And there are similarities between the character. There's no denying that, it's both films deal with outlaws and both films deal with people who want to be famous and are failing at it. And so there are parallels, but we sort of left those at the door. We didn't really talk about it too much because we wanted to move, create a distinct character even though there are similarities. And regarding how we presented Rooney, I would never say anything so grand as that I wanted her to represent the future of mankind, but I certainly tried to present her in a sort of iconic presentation. I wanted her to, when she's in the church and holding her daughter, I wanted her to look like a Catholic icon of the Virgin Mary. And I wanted to, after seeing her in her youth with a gun shooting people, I wanted to show her how she's changed and show her in a new light. And that was the most direct representation of where she is in her life at that point, even though she's still torn by her past life. And I do feel that there is, at the end of the movie, there's salvation for her. And if there is, she makes it to the end, she makes it out alive, and she's in a good place at the end of the movie, and if there is anything that can be said about, her representing anything larger than that, I welcome that, although it wasn't on my mind at the time.